Hello out there, and today we're going to be talking about a budget knife from SRM, a couple of them, and this one right here is the feature today. This is the 9211. Like I said, this is from SRM, the company that is formerly known as Sanrenmu. I purchased this knife myself because I was very interested in the design. This one up here I've already reviewed. I will link to that review down below. This is the 9201. They sent this to me for review, and this one is going to be given away relatively soon, I think, in the holiday giveaway that I have coming up in the next couple weeks. I also do have another one on the way from them that I'm going to be giving away on Instagram. So stay tuned for all that if you are interested in getting one of these knives in your hands. But today I have a pretty interesting conversation, I think, all about bang for your buck, comparative value, that sort of thing, because these two knives are both relatively inexpensive. I consider both of them to be budget knives, but there is a real difference in some of the characteristics of these two knives and a difference in the price. Because what we have up here, this one is a $29 knife, and then down below we have a $19 knife. And the question that I ask myself is, all right, well, which one is the better bang for your buck? And this is all a really just, I think, a compelling exercise in what people value over other like characteristics, what things we look at in a knife that really seem to matter to us. And maybe that extra $10 will be the difference between what you purchase and what you don't. Maybe the design, if you're like me, the design is what really carries you through. And for me, more than anything else, I wanted to get a knife that looked like this. And so that's why I purchased this one. But what's cool is that there are a number of, let's say, upgrades in the manufacturing and in some of the features of these knives that really paint a picture that like gives you the value for the extra $10. You can see the extra $10 between what you get with this knife and what you get with that. So let's take a look at it, and over the course of the video, we'll do basically a full review of this one as well. So what I really, really wish, as we slide down so you can see the numbers and the measurements, what I wish is that I had the Spyderco Akuchi still, because you know, the shape and the profile of that knife matches this SRM a little more closely than anything that I've had in a long time. I don't have that knife, and that's sort of what created the void that led me to getting this knife. But what we have here is a cutting edge that is right around 3.5 inches, an overall length that's just over 8, like almost 8.5. So it's a decent sized knife, but it isn't a big knife just because of the rest of the lines and the dimensions. So it is a very lightweight knife. Pretty cool piece, pretty well made, and it has 8CR13 MOV as the steel. So let's just go through this one real quick. We'll bring this other SRM back in a minute. So taking a look at it, we have a black coated blade. We have that 8CR13 MOV steel. I really, really like the way that they decided to do this this edge, because it's almost like a tanto, but there's not quite like the angular kind of look that you get on a lot of tantos. It's almost just belly, and you can see there's an angle, but it's not that extreme. So yeah, just a pretty interesting look there, almost a Persian look. So I like the blade design. It is something, like I said, very different from what I have in my collection right now, and I like how it's upswept, you know, at that top spine as well. All right, when we move on back, we don't have any jimping, but we do have a thumb disc. That is our opening method. So the thumb disc is one that a lot of people either love or hate. I don't hate it. I just want it to work well, and this one actually does. So opening the knife is not a problem. Flicks open very well. You can spider flick it as well. Also, even though there is no jimping, this does provide sort of a spot to dig into, and it's comfortable in that regard too. So thumb disc on this knife, I've seen it in some others where I really didn't care for it. It works just fine here though. Then as we move on back, you can see we have this like tan brown G10. The G10 here is pretty low traction. It is, like I said on this knife, a more inexpensive looking G10 than a lot of the stuff that you see out there. But the pattern of it and just the way that it looks is just fine. It's machined fairly well, so there's no issues in terms of sharpness. All right, you can see very clearly right here some of the interior machining on the liners to cut a little bit of weight. Let's give you the weight on it real quickly. 2.97 ounces. So, you know, for the overall length of the knife, you're not really dealing with anything too heavy. Let's bring in, just so you can get an understanding, a couple size comparisons. So the mini grip is a significantly smaller knife, and look at the weight on the mini grip, 2.78. So yeah, what we've got is a pretty lightweight knife here. What else do we have that would be appropriate? Well, size comparison, you know the bug out's going to be right around 2 ounces, but here's the bug out. PM2, since it's right here. As far as overall length goes, the PM2 is very comparable. So yeah, we've got a pretty lightweight EDC kind of knife here. All right, the action on it is pretty decent, sort of falling in line with the other SRM. It's not the most drop shutty, but the action flicks open and closed pretty darn easily, so zero issues there. I did not disassemble this only because of the slight issues that I had disassembling this one. A little more difficult than I would like, and honestly, the knife functions just fine, so there's no real need to. We do have a one position only pocket clip on this one, and we'll get back to that pocket clip in just a bit, but it is loop over and not completely deep carry, but it is deep enough. And then we also have a lanyard hole in the back of this back spacer. So those are the basics of the knife. All right, but $19.99 for this knife. You know, if you take a look at it and you look at the quality of it versus some of the other like 8CR 13MOV G10 knives out there, I mean, it's competitive in the marketplace, that's for sure. And again, it is a pretty unique kind of design for this budget price point as well. So it already has that going for it. Now, the interesting part is the comparison between this and the other SRM, because whichever one of these you got first, you're going to see the difference in that price point when you move from one to the other. So like I said, so we have $19.99 right here. Right, what we have is a black coated blade, and on the $29.99 knife, you have the like black wash, stone wash finish. So that's a little bit of an improvement for a lot of people. You also have this blue pivot collar that you don't have on the lesser expensive one. You also have D2 steel that you don't have on the lesser expensive one. Taking a look at the inside, you have nested liners on this knife here versus the ones that are not nested on this 8CR 13MOV model. This is, and I always forget the numbers, so that's why I'm referring to them the way I am. The 9211, it doesn't have the liners nested. So just like that, you can see, you know, you have upgrade in steel, upgrade in finish, you have jimping, you have the pivot collar, you have nested liners, all of that extra stuff for $10, you know, and so if you're looking at the value, you could make an argument that, wow, that's a great deal, a great upgrade, a great number of upgrades for just $10. You could also take a look at it and say, hey, well, I don't need all that stuff. I just want to spend 20 bucks on a knife. And you have what I think is a very fair price for this knife down here anyway. It's very competitive. So neither of these knives is going to be something that is bothersome in terms of hitting the wallet. But when you compare them, you know, you can really get an understanding of what matters to you. And I think there's value with both of these knives, regardless of what matters to you. And that's the point here. So neither of these knives are going to be, at least in my book, like absolute home runs. They're not the greatest things to ever come out. But, you know, I pick up Ganzos every now and then just because I like to have a knife that I can beat up on and carry and not really take any issue with, you know, abusing if needed. And this is one of those knives that for me, it's going to stay in my collection and it's going to become one of those knives. And I don't mind the 8CR 13MOV steel. I don't mind having to maintain it. I like the quality that I'm getting. And for me, even though there are those upgrades with these two knives, I definitely prefer this one. You know, I like the black coating on the knife. You know, even though it would be considered an upgrade in terms of manufacturing, I think that this looks just as good. I don't mind not having a pivot collar, and I don't really mind not having D2 steel. Of all of them, you know, it's always good to have D2 steel, but I don't know, for a budget knife, I don't expect much out of D2 at $30 anyway. I don't expect much out of performance. I expect, you know, a performance based on the price more than the steel that's marked on the blade, if that makes sense. So if I'm spending $30 and I'm getting a certain level of performance, or $20 and getting a certain level of performance, I'm fine, you know? And one of my, not gripes, but one of the things I didn't love about this knife, the 9201, one of the things I didn't love was just the way the scales were, and I wasn't, it wasn't such a detrimental thing. It just felt a little bit more on like the cheap side. And for some reason with this one, having those liners not nested, I think is an improvement for me. Something about like the look and the feel of it, it just feels a little bit better than this like blocky kind of feeling on the knife that has them nested. That doesn't mean I prefer liners to be exposed versus nested in general. It just means in this case, like I prefer what's going on here than what's going on here, even though, you know, on paper, you know, a nested liner means a little bit more machining, a little bit more work in the manufacturing process. For me, that didn't really matter. So I think both of these knives are pretty good options, and they're both affordable to a lot of people. So that's definitely a good thing. I think they've got the access lock, and they've done that pretty well for a long time. So they call it the ambi lock because it's ambidextrous. Oh, and then the one other thing that you don't have, excuse me, I glossed over it a minute ago. You don't have a reversible clip on this knife. Doesn't matter to me. For some people it would. You know, so if you're a lefty and you want to get one of these knives, then the 10 extra bucks right there is going to go to this knife. You know, so I think it just depends on who you are and what you look for and what you need, but the value could be could go either way with these depending on how you see it. So that's it, guys. I just wanted to throw that out there and get these two knives together in front of the camera because I thought it was really interesting, and very rarely can you get two knives, even from the same brand, where the differences in the price point are so clear and evident that you can look at them immediately and see, this is what I'm paying the extra 10 bucks for. So yeah, just wanted to share that with you today. Let me know your thoughts, any other questions, comments, complaints, suggestions. As always, guys, let me know down below. I'll talk with you soon. Take care and have a good one.